Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I am your host, Dr. Harbir Sayan. Thank you, as always, for taking the time to join me here, guys, to learn and to grow. I'm so grateful for all the support, as always, the liking, the sharing, everything that you do that helps the podcast grow so we can reach more colleagues and help support our profession. I'll always ask the same favor off the top. If you get any value out of this, please do share it with a friend, whether you put an Instagram picture up on Instagram or you put a link on LinkedIn or you send a text to your friend, whatever it is. Let them know we're having this conversation. Today is a very, very special episode. I am here at the New England College of Optometry in Boston, my alma mater. I'm so happy to be back. I haven't been here for so long. Walking around town, walking around the school is bringing back so many positive, happy memories, as well as a few anxious memories of exams and all the other stuff. But really, really happy to be here. And I'm here with the one and only Dr. Howard Purcell. And if you don't know Dr. Purcell, he is the president of the college and also an alum of NECO and a very, very well-known figure in the optometric community. Thank you, Dr. Purcell, for being here with me on the podcast.
It's a pleasure, Harbir. Thank you for coming back. I'm sorry it's been so long, but we're happy to have you back at NECO.
It's so good to be here. So good to be here. Dr. Purcell, if you could, sorry, because I kind of butchered your intro and I feel really bad. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and maybe a little bit of background on yourself, and then we'll jump into the conversations that we're going to have.
Well, I currently have the honor and pleasure, as you mentioned, to be the president and CEO of NECO. I've served in that role for about 6.5 years. I am an alum, and my father's an alum, so I'm a second-generation alum of this wonderful institution. Coming in, didn't have a whole lot of background in academia, to be completely honest. When I left optometry school, I joined my father's practice in South Florida, Miami Beach, where I'm from. Spent about 10 years in that practice and enjoyed every minute. And by the way, learned a ton about the business of optometry from my dad, who was really very astute when it came to those things. We had a new optometry school show up in South Florida. I spent a little time there, literally within 6-7 miles of my office. So I was chief of cornea contact lenses there for about 5 years. Then went on to spend about 13 years at J&J, Johnson & Johnson Vision, and about 10 at Essilor Luxottica. And now I've been here, as I said, for the past 6.5 years. So pretty much can't keep a job. I feel like I've been incredibly fortunate, Harbir, in this profession to see it from so many different perspectives. And the past 6.5 years have been incredible. Being around students, they're so excited about this profession. They're all going to be the best optometrists that ever lived. And it's so invigorating. I say this all the time. If you have a bad day in optometry, come and spend a day at an optometry school. You will be reinvigorated by the future of this profession. The future is in great hands, and I'm just thrilled to be able to be some small part of it.
That's amazing. Well, it's certainly not a small part, Dr. Purcell. It's really cool to hear your journey through optometry, the experience that you have, and you certainly are one of the more influential people in the profession across the board. So it's really lovely to be able to chat with you, but also really cool to hear that you get that enthusiasm from the students, because I haven't been in school now for a while, but, the days kind of blur together and you don't remember what it was like, but it's really nice that you get that sense of enthusiasm. Students are excited to get out there and become optometrists and practice optometry. I think we need that energy to help continue to move the profession forward for it to grow. If students are coming through here and they're not excited to get out there, then I feel it'll start to become a little bit stale, right? A part of my job, I believe, is not just to see my patients and, provide the best service. Part of my job is also to help my profession to be better. And if I'm not enthusiastic about it, if I'm not really energized about it, I'm likely not going to put in that extra effort. So it's nice to hear that. Now, we want to talk a little bit about student life. We're going to talk, given that our audience a lot of it is Canadian, we want to talk about the fact that, of course, there's a large Canadian population here. And what is it like for Canadian students? Why don't we start there? What percentage of students would you say at NECO are from Canada?
It's varied through the years, but it's always been somewhere around 20 to 30%. These days, probably 25% plus of our student body comes from Canada. That's something that's been part of the DNA of NECO for as long as I can remember, probably for over 40 years. So, I'll even take it one step further. Many of our faculty are Canadian. I tease often that our smartest graduates, we don't let them go back to Canada. We keep them here as faculty members. But Canadian students have been such a big part, and our faculty has been such a big part of NECO for so many years. It's part of our DNA. Like I said, it's part of who we are. International students in general, but in particular Canada, has always been a big part of what we do.
That's amazing. It's amazing. It's such a large portion. I'd love if you could let some of those come back to Canada, please. We're a little short on ODs right now. So the best and the brightest, we need them to come back. But that's actually something we want to talk about is what is the journey for Canadian students, when they graduate? Do they stay here? Do they go back? it's a bit of a broad and vague question, but there are a lot of changes in the political climate, of course, recently. And back home, back in Canada, all you hear is the word tariffs everywhere. But I think the word tariff is starting to become sort of a proxy for all the other changes that may be happening and concerns about if I buy American or if I go to America to study. Are you noticing any changes in student behavior or conversations with students here, Canadian students in particular?
Yeah, well, I'll give you a great example of that. Tomorrow we have an open house because these questions have arisen so much, and individually we've done our best to answer them. But as we always do at NECO, we try to be as transparent as we can. And so we'll have an open house tomorrow. Many of the questions that have been pre-submitted are around these very issues. And so I think the best way to answer your question is this. We try to stay as close to these issues as we can. We have incredible connectivity within the community here in Boston due to the great work of so many, Dr. Gary Chu and others who make sure we are up to date and can influence as best we can what goes on in our city and in our state. So I feel really good about that. Look, we don't have all the answers. This is a very dynamic time. Things seem to change by the minute at times. So all we can do is make sure we are staying current, sharing that information, and doing everything we possibly can to make sure our Canadian students feel comfortable coming here, that path coming back and forth is as easy as it can be, and that we're sensitive to the goings on and that we are there to advocate on their behalf. I think that's something we've always done. This hasn't changed, honestly, in the past few months with the craziness that's going on and the uncertainty that's going on. But that's been the case for NECO forever. We want to support all of our students, but with such a significant population coming from Canada, we feel an additional obligation to assure we are staying on top of that. Dr. Chu and I just spent some time in Toronto last weekend. We were just listening a lot, observing, trying to communicate everything we learn. And tomorrow's open house is just one example of the many types of communication that we do to keep everyone informed. Whatever we know, they're going to know.
Yeah, great. That's good to know. And I think that'll be reassuring for not just current students, but prospective students who are looking to American schools, to NECO, given all the changes. One of the big changes that's happened recently that's not a political change, so to speak, but in optometry, very important change, is that British Columbia and Ontario both recently announced they're no longer going to be accepting the NBEO as equivalent to the Canadian board exam, the OEBC. And I know this has been a shock to a lot because I have personally received a lot of messages from current optometry students in the US. How has NECO received that message, and what do you foresee now, assuming this is going to stay, and Canadian students who have come to America to study will have to go back and take the Canadian board exam. What do you foresee? I know it's kind of early days, but how do you see that moving forward?
Well, first of all, I'll say many students already took the Canadian exam and the national board exam. And I think to make sure all your options were available, that was something that clearly was important to do. Mm-hmm. We, unfortunately, have nothing to say about decisions that are made by these national boards, the examination bodies. What we can do is give them our feedback. And what we were particularly concerned about, Harbir, was the timing. It left some people in the middle a bit. And, having perhaps had some expenses in buying different prep materials, et cetera, and now kind of finding out at the last minute. So what we did do is certainly share those concerns after we had good discussions with our Canadian leadership, students who have leadership here in our institution, to convey those concerns to the appropriate parties. They actually responded well, and I think have been a bit more flexible in understanding that their decision, and given the timing of their decision, had a pretty big impact on a certain group of people that sort of got caught in the middle. Honestly, other than that, we can continue to just ask them to be as open-minded to accepting any boards, making it as easy as possible as we can for our students. These are unfortunately decisions that are beyond our control, but we can do our best to offer our suggestions. And I will tell you, they listen. They're open-minded to our feedback. That doesn't mean we're going to get everything we ask for, but it does mean we have a good channel of communication, and that we have used that channel of communication to express some of the immediate challenges that it created. Long term, I hope we'll have additional discussions and debates about the best way. I suspect that in general, there are many reasons why the Canadian organizations made the decisions they did. I'm not privy to all of that, so I'm always a little careful about judging too much until I really have all the facts. But one thing I can tell you is we are going to consistently be here to protect and defend our Canadian students where we can, to make sure that their concerns are voiced both through themselves directly, but also through the institution. And I feel good about what we've done there so far. Obviously, we're frustrated and not happy with the decision, if I have to be completely honest, but We have to live with that decision and find the best ways we can to accommodate our students and to help them to be prepared to practice anywhere in the world. And that is our goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe as far as practical skills, clinical skills, NECO is certainly training students well to practice anywhere they go. However, when it comes to preparing for board exams, I think that's where things start to get a little tricky now, for myself included. Over the last 15 years or so, if you studied at NECO or any other American school, I could do the American boards and I could go back to BC. Fortunately, that's where I was going anyway. But now a student that's at any American school will likely not take the NBEO, assuming they want to move back to Canada, and take the OEBC before they can be licensed in practice. Do you foresee that NECO will change anything as far as preparing students for board exams, Canadian board exams, in addition to the national board exam sphere?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. There's a lot of different approaches to preparing for national board exams. We'll just call them national board exams, whichever one you want. NECO has never taken the approach that we will build our curriculum around the national boards. I'm not suggesting anyone else has, but perhaps others have maybe looked at it that way. We don't look at it that way. We look at it as, what is the information necessary? Now, don't get me wrong. We're looking at what's on the national board. We have done a very thorough search of our program, of our curriculum, where potential gaps may be, et cetera. So I'm not suggesting we're not mindful of that, but we don't build our program around that. We feel like, let's make sure we're teaching the information that's necessary. And then we have created a great preparatory opportunity led by Dr. Jen Riley. She does an absolute fantastic job of looking at each of the parts of the board, trying to do prep work and, simulations, which I think most of the institutions do. So everything we can do, we want to make sure we're preparing those students, but we haven't built the curriculum around that. And that's something we continue to stick by. Our students continue to do well on national boards. We're happy about that. We'd like them to continue to do better. We want 100% to pass the first time. And so we really have focused a significant amount of time and effort in assuring we're doing everything we can possibly do to help our students prepare. But there's a lot of different philosophies on that. In each school, you've heard this before, one school, right? Everybody does things a little bit differently. And you have honestly, when you look at national boards, most of the group are within the same kind of zone. You have a few outliers, but in general, everyone is in a similar position. Now, we've seen fluctuation in board scores, and there's lots of reasons that happens. We have great students. They are incredibly smart, incredibly passionate about what's going on. We continue to look at the national board, and as you've seen the adaptation, at least I could speak more to the NBEO, the adaptations that it has made to try to stay current and try to assure it's testing for the things that are truly necessary as we get out into the world of practice. What are those minimum competencies that are needed? And I don't know as much about OEBC, but I would say that I assume its efforts are to do the same thing. So I think we're all trying to achieve the same goals. The boards are in a position to protect the public. I appreciate that. We're in a position to make sure that we're training these students to be prepared to care for the communities that they serve in, and that will continue to be what drives us and what motivates us.
Got it. No, that's wonderful. I think that approach makes sense. If all you're doing in school is preparing to write a board exam, I don't think that prepares you to be the best clinician possible. So being prepared to be the best clinician, hopefully that will then, the result will be that you do well on boards as well. A little shift in gears. There is definitely in Canada, and I imagine across the USA, there seems to be a shortage of optometrists or a high demand for optometrists at this point. And I wonder if you have an answer as to whether it's grassroots or somewhere in between, how do we answer that call? Of course, there's going to be more and more optometrists or eye care providers in general retiring and less filling those spots, it seems. Is the answer more schools, which there seems to be some people's approach to this, more optometry schools that is, or is there something else you might recommend or have ideas about?
Yeah, I'm laughing because this is something we spend a great deal of time thinking about. Yeah. And we feel we've come up with something that is a potential solution for it. And so I'm speaking personally now, my own views on this, if I may. I don't know that the answer is more brick and mortar schools. I really don't think that is the answer. And primarily because faculty, administration, the people who really are ready to commit to, giving their career to academia, I have so much respect for those people. In many cases, they're not making the same amount of money they could make if they were out in a normal practice, but they love what they do. They're committed to the educational process. And I think that for me is so invigorating and so stimulating. And for me makes, it gets me excited coming to work every day. And we do have people, fortunately, that are committed to that. But you could use the example, I'll use the states, but you could use provinces in the same manner. In the U.S., just as an example, we have 30 states that don't have an optometry school. So if you are you're interested in optometry and you live in one of those states, or let's use the provinces, that you live in one of those provinces that doesn't have a school, and you have even bigger challenges. You only have 2 schools in your entire country.
Right.
So let's imagine you're in one of those provinces or one of those states, and you're entrenched in the community. You have a family. You can't even consider optometry as a profession. We would like to take that obstacle away.
Right.
We would like to go to places where we can deliver the didactic portion of the program through distance education, very formalized education, not PowerPoint online, but formalizing it in a way that it's delivered through this manner. It's very different. And we now have internal instructional designers and expertise we brought into the institution to create these programs for that media, for that platform. It's very different. And been proven to be very successful, by the way, in nursing and in some other related fields that you could draw some corollaries to optometry. So, we would have the opportunity to say to somebody, okay, if you live in one of these 30 states, stay where you are. We'll deliver the didactic education through distance education. You'll have to come to Boston here and there for just, we want to make sure everybody is aligned and we can create good consistency across the program. And then your clinical experiences would take place on the ground in those communities, with the idea that if you're doing your clinical experience there, the likelihood is you're going to stay in those communities. I think this works for Canada. I think this works for the U.S., all of North America. There are some challenges, as you might imagine. No one's done this before. We have a wonderful group of accreditors, and we continue to have good discussions with them as to how this can ultimately lay out. But our goal ultimately is to have an agile campus. If you want to come to class, you come to class. If ultimately you learn better, which, by the way, not everybody learns their best sitting in a classroom, right? So if you want to, do it in whatever manner is best for you, you can do it that way. It's a lofty goal, I appreciate. But to answer your question, I don't know if it's necessarily about continuing to build more and more schools. I think it might be more about how do we take the best of the best, our best person in all the different aspects of this wonderfully diverse profession, and bring them forward to help us educate in a broader way. I really think that's possible. And, just a couple of weeks ago, I was in D.C. I was fortunately got invited to a meeting with 250 deans and presidents of schools all across the country. I was the only optometry school represented there. And what I recognized very quickly is we're behind. That many reputable institutions, by the way, North American wide, have moved into this way of educating. I mean, when you think about it, it is really crazy to assume everybody learns the same. Right. I happen to be one of those who likes to go to class. I like to sit there. I want to listen. I want to absorb. I want to engage. But I should not assume everybody learns that way. And I'll tell you why we absolutely know that's true. We have 130 students here, and first 2 weeks of class or so, we get 130 students in class. But literally by week 3, 4, 5, it starts to sort out because we provide a recorded version, just as an example, of the course. Some people want to slow that down. Some people want to speed it up. Some people use it as an adjunct to coming to class. But what we hear loud and clear is they're saying we don't all learn the same. Would you be able to provide some flexibility? And what we've done is what many schools have done, which is provide a recording of the class. But that's not really enough, in my opinion. It doesn't solve the problem of those 30 states who don't have a school that you have to pack your bags and then move somewhere. So I love that you asked that question because it's something we spend a lot of time thinking about. I respect the schools and colleges that have been built and the great leaders we have and great faculty that we have. But I do worry as the numbers continue to rise, where are we going to continue to find these great faculty, administrators willing to put in the time and effort? And by the way, these days, being the president of an academic institution might not be the most sought after job in the world. I love it. Don't get me wrong, but the pressures of it are significant. And I tap into every experience I've ever had in my career to try to make the best decisions I can here. And I have a great team around me of people who have been in academia their entire careers who can bring a great perspective to the table. And that's what we try to do. We try to make the best decisions we can. We make mistakes, RB. I guarantee you we make mistakes. We own up to them and we try not to make the same mistakes twice, but we do our best to make decisions that are always in the best interest of our student. I think keeping in mind what is your top priority helps to make those tough decisions a little bit easier. I learned that during my J&J days. If your listeners have not looked at the J&J Credo before and they are business owners, they should take a look at it. It is a wonderful way for me. Just a quick story. So when you're a leader and you're sitting in a room and you have two groups come to you with their philosophies on how they want to do something, and both of them make a whole lot of sense. You're supposed to always be the smartest person in the room and be able to listen to these two inputs and say, yeah, you know what? I think that one's better. No, I think this one's better. I guarantee you're not always going to be the smartest one in the room. In fact, rarely am I the smartest one in the room. The people come in and talking about things that they're passionate about know so much more than I do about it. So what I learned during my time at J&J was, what is this credo? It's the first thing you learn when you join J&J. All my colleagues at J&J know this. I could tell you the credo right now. I could tell you what at least the 4 components of the credo. Number 1 priority is to your customer. Number 2 is to the people who prescribe your product. Number 3, your environment. And number 4, your shareholders. And I haven't worked for J&J for over 20 years, but I'll tell you this. It's interesting when you see the shareholders at the bottom, the natural question to ask is, well, why are they at the bottom? Well, if you take care of the first 3, you're not going to have to worry about your shareholders. But here's the key to the credo. Now, when those 2 groups come to you with their great ideas and both very valid, and you have to be the smartest person in the room, now you go back and you say, well, wait a minute. We agreed on our prioritization. Our number 1 priority is X. Which of these 2 ideas really rings and resonates with what our prioritization is? And what happens when you do that is there still may be one of those 2 people who's not as happy as the other, but they understand why you made the decision. It isn't just Howard thinks he's the smartest person, and so he's going to make the decision. No, we all agreed to how we prioritize, and based on that, that's how we're going to make our decisions. So around here, it's students first. And I know that sounds cliche, but when you have to make a difficult decision, it really helps by saying, all right, which one of these really follows what we believe our credo? And I think all business owners should have their credo. It doesn't have to be as fancy as the J&J one that's up on the wall in every J&J facility in the world, I suspect. But it can be at least agreed upon. And when you get unanimous agreement on it, now those hard decisions at least become a little bit easier to make, and you get a little bit more buy-in to why you've made those decisions. Again, as opposed to you think you're the smartest person in the room.
Right.
Make sense?
Absolutely. Makes perfect sense. I think as a business owner myself, having that vision, clear vision, having that North Star helps you in every aspect of your business, whether it's purchasing, whether it's hiring, whatever, dealing with a patient, knowing if you know that that's your priority and you're that's how you're directing your decision making, it makes a big difference. So of course, I imagine in a academic institution, it's very important as well.
And really in any leadership position. Sure. That's what I'm saying. From the J&J experience, I was able to bring that into academia, and it's helped a lot, I think. But you have to get buy-in. You have to have people believe in what your priorities are, and you have to be willing to adapt those priorities. And we were living in a world that is changing so quickly. I mean, think about the technology side, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, 3D printing, telehealth, and now put all those together and what impact they can have. I mean, the world is changing so fast. And as leaders, we have to be mindful of that, understand how to use those technologies as best we can, but also how we prioritize and how we make the difficult decisions around that. And for me, that was such a lesson. And I've tried to, utilize that lesson for my entire career. So far, it's paid off okay.
Yeah, it seems to be doing well. The idea of going back to how we can improve the quality of the applicant and then therefore the quality of the doctor coming out of the other side of the academic institution. I love the approach of starting to use distance education, virtual education, and helping people to become optometrists where they are and stay where they are. Also, I think that's so important because we end up getting these vast areas of the country where there's not enough service providers, right? And there's shortage or difficulties with access to care. So if somebody lives in the middle of some state that does not have a school, but they can learn to become an optometrist and train and be there and support their community, I think that's
right. Or province. I'll just add that. I think it is just as viable.
100%.
When you talked about the need for optometrists, I can't imagine it's not. And in fact, I know it's the same. You have many rural areas and we get very rural quickly. You think Boston, you think big city, but literally you go a little west even from where we are here today and you see deserts of where care is not being provided. So you don't have to go very far to find those opportunities. That's for sure. I will say, just back on the subject of the way we're looking at our education, I should mention that this past fall semester, we launched 2 of our courses that were only offered through distance education, through asynchronous education. And it was an opportunity for us to see, how did that go? How did the patients compare? Because you got the same faculty member now who used to teach it in a traditional classroom is now teaching it in a different manner. And meeting with the students, by the way, this isn't they'd never see the faculty member. It's a little more self-paced, but they have occasions to meet with the faculty member. How did that go? How did they compare? How did the grades compare? What was the feedback? And we're at the other side of that now. And we've learned a ton. I think there are many students who loved it, but most of the feedback, honestly, was really constructive and like, here's how it could be better. And here's why. So what we think we'll be able to do, what we hope we'll be able to do ultimately is to say, look, in this environment, which, we don't have a lot of examples to show, and a same course with the same instructor, here's how these students fared. And I can give you a little inside track on that. So far, it is pretty equivalent. Generally speaking, pretty equivalent in terms of performance. And we're new at this, so we still have some opportunities to adapt it and adjust it. And the students are giving us great feedback that can really help us to improve. So just wanted to make sure that other piece. So, we've actually begun to go down that path, but we're doing it slowly, calculatedly, so we can demonstrate that there's equivalency, at the very least equivalency. We're not expecting these students to do so much better, but we certainly don't want to see them doing any worse. So if we can create that equivalency, that continues to encourage us to move forward. And so far, that's been the case.
That's excellent. I certainly am one of those students who doesn't love being in the classroom, so we're a little different in that.
See, we have two of us here, and we both learn differently. There's a great example.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I was certainly one of those, even back 15, 18 years ago, whatever it was one of those halfway through the semester, I didn't always show up to class. So, relied on my classmates' notes a lot of the times, but made it through. I made it through. I did well.
And whatever it is, whatever way you learn, I think we at least owe it to the students to continue to think through ways we can create as agile or flexible of a program as possible. I think it enables us to get more students. Look, for us, and I don't think anybody's different, but I can only speak for myself, the two biggest issues we have in optometry, debt and applicant pool. And I will tell you, this leadership team at this institution has spent a great deal of its time focusing on those two issues, because if we don't, we're in trouble. And we've seen some good things. Last year, we had we had the most applicants for optometry school since we've been keeping record. That's great. Great news, right?
Yeah.
On the other side, it's still not enough. We still don't have enough, but at least we're seeing some good movement. Optometry Gives Me Life, a fabulous campaign that we do in the United States to help raise awareness, and something I hope we can do in Canada as well, to continue to raise awareness with the profession. Optometry is the best kept secret in medicine. We'd prefer it not be the best kept secret. Because, you think about it, it has everything that I think this generation of coming through is looking for. You have the credibility and the respect of being a doctor. You're going to change people's lives every single day. You're going to make a great living. You can have a good work-life balance if that's what you choose. And hopefully you're going to give back, because you're going to have a gift now that many people can't afford, and you're going to give that back. To me, I'm biased, but I feel like I could sell anybody on optometry. It's an incredible profession. Yeah. But the majority of people who are not within our sphere of optometry, you ask them, what is an optometrist? You're going to get some very interesting answers to that.
Well, you'll certainly get one answer, which is the most common answer, which is, you asked me which is better, one or two. And it's up to us, as I was saying to you earlier, it's up to us to decide what the perception of optometry is. And it certainly shouldn't be just that, right? And if we can provide that insight and help change the perception of the public, we'll get more students, whether it's high school, undergrad students, seeing the value in becoming an optometrist and the benefit of it.
May I just add one thing to that? The idea of getting, the number of students, not only debt, but the applicant pool. Our colleagues are the number one vehicle for marketing.
Absolutely.
I will tell you, I get to meet every student who gets an interview here at NECO. I meet them as a group, and we go around the room and they tell us about themselves and why optometry. And I'm going to tell you, 9 out of 10 times, it's somebody like you, Harbir, who has shown them the way. They were sitting in your chair as a patient, perhaps, and they were leaning in a little bit. They wanted to see, and you showed them, and you gave them here's what the retina looks like. That is how we inspire these people to do it. Tell them that, by the way, diabetes and hypertension, two of the most prominent systemic diseases that we confront in our world, that we can be often the first people to identify those changes. They're those kinds of discussions lead to the wonderful students that we have sitting here. It's the number one reason that I see, in my experience at least, and I don't think my colleagues would disagree who sit in the chair that I do, that is the number one way. We don't really advertise that much. We go out to colleges and universities, and we spend a lot of time in Canada because that's an important constituency for us. But really, if you went to NECO and someone says to you, Harbir, what did you think? Did you have a good experience? And you say, that was a horrible experience, we're not going to have any students here, right? So it is so important. And I think in your office, when you have that opportunity and you see a young person perhaps who just seems to be a little interested, I would love it if we could take that moment to say, hey, let me show you something, or let me tell you why this profession is so great. That's why we have these incredible people here that are studying optometry and that want to be optometrists. So I just ask you, listeners, you can play a role in this. You can do something to help. If you love optometry like you and I do, then give these people a little more insight. Show them what you do. Show them how much you enjoy what you do. Because most optometrists really love what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. And that's a big part of what I spend my time doing as sort of advocating for the profession is actually not to the public, it's to our colleagues. Let's stand up and let's do a little bit more for our profession, whether it's getting out there and speaking about it, or exactly what you just said is speaking to the students who happen to be your patients potentially, or wanted to volunteer, observe in your practice, show them what optometry is about and speak well of it. And because that's going to, hopefully those people will become our colleagues and help the profession grow in the future.
Absolutely.
And a big part of what I find myself talking about these days in a similar vein to help our profession grow is scope. Expansion is a term that's used, or back home, we're trying to use terms modernization or optimization these days. Expansion seems to have a bit more of a negative connotation around it. So scope expansion, scope optimization, is that something that you feel is a relevant conversation right now here at NECO? How important is growing the scope of optometry, do you feel?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, it's critical. I look back, even in my lifetime, I'm not that old, but I am getting there. I watched my father who couldn't even use diagnostic medications, right? And look where we are today. It's absolutely incredible. And that is from the work of so many incredible colleagues who, in many cases, dedicated their careers to ensuring our profession continues to grow. So it is critical. Whatever else I say from here, I just want to make that clear that continuing to expand our scope. One of the challenges we do have is the wonderful students we have today never lived in a world where they couldn't write prescriptions for glaucoma, just as an example. So we often do have to give them a little history lesson just to say, hey, let me remind you that incredible work that's been done to get us here. Today, we not only have to look forward, but we've got to look on our back. You probably know this. Our colleagues in Florida being threatened to even be able to call themselves doctors. So it is a challenge. It is one that this institution plays the biggest role it possibly can. Again, I'll mention Dr. Chu, Gary Chu, leads those efforts for us. We are very close to what we call Beacon Hill, right down the street from us, which is our legislative body. We were just there 2 weeks ago trying to help students to appreciate advocacy. And we had a group of students from two of the institutions here in Massachusetts, MCPHS and us, and showing them this isn't tough. These are just people like you. They want to understand it. What an important thing to learn, because wherever you're going to wind up, we want you to continue to be an advocate. We have to continue advocating for optometry. Now, having said that, from a curriculum standpoint, and Dr. Eric Weisberg, our dean, does an incredible job with this, but we have to assure that we're training to the highest level that's practiced anywhere.
Right.
Anywhere. And that typically means anywhere in North America, at least today. So that is, it's a burden, I will say. It's tough on our faculty. Again, I respect them so much for what they have to do. Think of it this way. My dad graduated in 1954. There was a 4-year program at NECO. Now, you can imagine the curriculum in 1954 was very different. Majority of the time, they were starting to progress, but they were great refractionists. My dad was a master refractionist, right, but he taught himself slit lamp. He taught himself BIO. He taught himself gonioscopy. That wasn't anything he learned in school. Fast forward to now, 2025, where we are today, it's still a 4-year program. So it gives you a little sense for what incredible faculty we have that are able to, and granted, we're now going through summers most of the times that we've added time, but we love it. We love that the scope has increased, but appreciate that when people ask about, for example, how come you're not teaching them more business education? By the way, I asked the same questions when I arrived here. The challenge is you got to make sure they're learning everything to prepare them for the medical side of this wonderful practice. National boards, other boards, these are not testing on business management. They're testing on, making sure the acumen of knowledge is clear and knowledgeable and that you meet some criteria that's been set. So I don't expect you're going to see anytime soon optometry schools increasing the amount of practice management, if you will. We all do some of it. But this, it wasn't that long ago when you were a student. Your first 3 years, even part of your 4th year, it's not really that much of a priority. You're getting through boards. You're trying to do all the things, passing exams. Now, when you get to your final year and now you're starting to think about a job, then it starts to become important. So I think we have some solutions that could help. But for the reality of it is this wonderful expansion scope, which we all love and we want to see continue, puts a great deal of pressure on the schools and colleges to assure we're graduating. Every graduate who graduates could practice anywhere they want in the country, in North America, and the world. And I'll take it one step further, can now influence other parts of the world so we can help raise their standards, raise their scope. And that is something that NECO, I'm really proud, far before my time, has been focused on with these strong relationships all over the world to do just that. And World Council of Optometry does good work in there, but we'd like to think at NECO that's something that we have helped, that we continue to support, not only here where we are, which we support every day, but all over the world.
That's wonderful. It's funny. I appreciate the insight on the scope expansion and the fact that there is so much to pack into a 4-year program, so the students come out with the broadest scope or education and training that they can have clinically. But on my list of questions was business classes and business education, because yes, to your point, there's very little of it. And I think you've already answered the question. Like it's just tight to pack it in there.
Yeah, and let me just be clear. I think maybe to say there's very little of it, I'm not sure I'm going to go that far. We do it here at NECO, and I can only speak at NECO. I believe starting in the back half of your 3rd year and all throughout your 4th year, there is a wonderful course that's given. I think it's pass-fail. You're out at your rotations all over the world. Your priority is seeing patients and making sure you're caring for these people. And it's a nice thing to have, a nice thing to do. Yeah. But it isn't, at the top of your priority list. So I don't want to give the wrong impression. We have some great people who work at every institution trying to assure students have some of the basic knowledge about the business of optometry, if you will. But it's not enough. I'm going to be the first to admit that to you. There's more we need. And the focus on that tends to happen more literally right before you graduate in the first couple of years. So what if? I'll just give you a what if. What if we could create together with the industry a postgraduate business of optometry course? Maybe it's a 1-week course. Maybe it's a 10-day course. Maybe it's a 2-week course, whatever it may be. And no matter what aspect of optometry you're going into, here's some of the fundamental things that you need to understand. I think it does a couple things. One, no matter where you're going to be, it's going to give you that confidence to understand the business side. 2, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to go to independent practice, I believe you have 2 major obstacles. One is debt, and we're trying to work hard at that, and we can come back to that one. But the other is you've never run a small business before. I don't want that to be the obstacle for people to say, well, my choices are now narrowed because I've never run a business. I don't know how to do that. Together with the industry, we should be able to create something that allows people to feel at least a little bit better knowing I've got the foundational knowledge. Now the sky's the limit. I have all the different possibilities. So for us, that's been really critical. And then we have to look at debt. I mean, I realize and recognize in Canada, perhaps it's a little less of an issue, but we have so many Canadian students in the U.S. who are accumulating significant debt. I appreciate that, and it doesn't go unnoticed. It's top of mind for me every day. We've created some programs that help that. One's called Sponsored Pathways, which essentially says if you make an agreement with a group to join them, there's a quid pro quo. They'll help you offset some of your debt. It's that simple. And because supply and demand, as you know, right now, working very much in the favor of our graduates, in many cases, they have 4 or 5 job opportunities when they get out. The industry has no problem with that. So today we have 7 groups now, I think, that are offering such an opportunity. And I hope that will continue because I think the industry should have some skin in the game in this. They're hiring our great people. They're helping them to grow either a practice, an organization, whatever it may be. And by the way, the 40, 50,000, whatever a year that it may be, and that's a lot of money, don't get me wrong, for them, they're losing that monthly when they don't have an optometrist in the office. So it's been a good program. And I think for many of our students, it's been very helpful. But we have to focus on those 2 issues. And I think this is a North American challenge, not a U.S. challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly is. Now, the debt thing, unfortunately for Canadians, it is compounded by the fact that our dollar is significantly weaker. So we come to the USA and whatever the number might end up being that they're in debt, you generally add about 35%. When we go back home, it just looks a little bit worse. So to know that there's some support through NECO, this interesting that one of the questions I wanted to ask you was about industry involvement. And I see, and given your background working in industry, J&J and Essilor, and I know that you have great, strong partnerships and relationships that you've brought to NECO to improve the program and connections there. But I feel, and I know that there's a sentiment out there that perhaps there's 2 sides to that coin. Is it a bit dangerous to have too many partnerships with industry, especially in an academic setting? There's sort of multiple aspects to this question. The other end is when students are having these sort of debt relief type programs with, we don't have to name any companies, but the companies that are providing these, is it taking away from independent private practice? And is that something we have to be conscious of? Is industry then potentially affecting the long-term trajectory of optometry in that regard? Sorry, there's 2 pretty big questions.
Yeah, let me take the second one first because I think that one is reasonably clear for me. There's concern, and we always have to be mindful of the industry having too much of an impact. But let me say this. 1, there is a clear line between the industry in any way impacting our academic program. That just crosses the line. That cannot happen. But going back to sort of your original question, I think they're hiring our people anyway. Today, lots of reasons why people decide to go into all different practice modalities. And we leave the door open and understand there may be lots of reasons why you do that. So my argument is, why not have them have some skin in the game and help pay for it? So it's already happening. When I arrived here, and all of my predecessors have seen, there's a growth of different modalities in which you can practice. And students have a lot of different choices to go a lot of different ways. And I don't hold a grudge against anybody who chooses a certain path. Mm-hmm. That's the path they choose. That's already going on. So having them pay for some of the education in addition to that, I have absolutely no problem with it all. But I do want to be clear again, there is a limit by which the industry can influence. They do not influence our curriculum in any way, shape, or form. But I'll make a bold statement to you. We cannot achieve the goals we want to achieve in optometric education without the industry. Without their support, I don't believe, and I'm speaking for myself here, we cannot do and aspire to the things we want to do without them. So how do we find that good, happy median? I think we have. Dr. Chu has created something called the Industry Collaborative. And just, if I may say just a couple words about that, this was an opportunity. And I guess if I go back in time, I had said to Gary many times that if I knew what I know now about optometric education, when I was in industry, I could have been much more effective at what I did. I didn't know all the intricacies, the challenges, what was sort of under the hood, if you will. So Gary and I made the decision, you know what? We're going to create a meeting. We're going to invite the industry to it, and we're going to lift up the hood, and we're going to say, hey, we're going to show you the good, the bad, and the ugly of what at least our perspective is of optometric education, and most of it is good, by the way. And then we have some challenges, and we want you to help us solve those challenges. And Gary's done an amazing job. We're now, I think, going to be in year 4 or year 5 of this program. When we started it, we thought, if we have 6 or 8 companies join us, that would be great. We had 60 companies join us year 1. That's continued to grow. Students are a part of it. Most of the organizations in optometry have been kind enough to show up. The AOA's there, ASCO's there, ARBO's there, NBEO is there. I mean, we have everyone represented. It gives us a wonderful opportunity to say, how do we pool our resources? A collaborative, right? How do we collaborate to solve some of the key challenges, to talk about some of the sensitive issues that we have? It's a way to, like I said, to give my colleagues who are still in the industry side a better perspective of what's going on. Therefore, they're going to be able to be better partners. But, and perhaps having come from that environment, my perspective might be a little more, I don't know if aggressive is the right word, but more, understanding of the value that brings. But it's immense. And I don't mind saying that I think the industry should have some skin in the game. I think they should contribute and support what's going on. Even if it's self-serving, they need our graduates. And at the very least, when you support students in optometry school, when they know they really aren't a great customer for you, but you're doing it because you care, at least when that company walks into your office, you're going to open the door and let them in because you remember they were there for you when you were in school. And we don't have really a whole lot of problems helping groups understand it. What we have challenges sometimes is there's something going on seemingly every night at the college, and we want to make sure when our partners are putting on programs, et cetera, that they're well attended and our students can be there. But other than that, I would say it's all upside. But you have to have a separation of church and state, and that exists, has to exist. It's part of our accreditation. It exists. Everybody appreciates and understands that, but that doesn't mean we can't build strong partnerships and find ways to support our students and to help reduce the debt and to help increase applicant pool, the things that tend to be the biggest challenges we have.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been my observation since you had come into office as president and CEO here, that you certainly seem to be more open to those types of collaborative.
Well, that can work for you and against you. I remember when I first arrived here, I was asked, is this going to be the Essilor Luxottica New England College?
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you, it wasn't my sentiment so much, but I do know that there were a little bit of a concern, but at the same time, there's certainly seems to be a lot of upside, especially when you're coming from an era where there was a very, not just a line, it was like a moat between a school and industry. And now, it seems like you have certainly been one of those people to bring them closer together in other schools. But then it seems also then that line maybe in some scenarios, not here, some scenarios that's been a bit blurred and there's some concern.
Perhaps. I would just say, I know all the deans and presidents in North America. They are very ethical people who care deeply about their institutions and do their very best to make sure that they draw that firm line. Some are more welcoming to, as an example, allow people to come into the institution versus doing it off campus and things like that. And you have to allow room for what's comfortable for everyone and what works for them. We only have in the U.S. 3 private independent schools left. So that's NECO, ICO, and SCO. So Southern College in Memphis and ICO in Chicago, Illinois College of Optometry. I love that environment, to be honest with you, because we don't answer to a provost. We don't answer to a university president. We make our own decisions. We live and die by those decisions. And, we've mostly lived. There's been a couple of wounds, but overall, but I love that. And if you would have talked to people 20 years ago, they would have said private independent optometry school will not survive. Well, I will tell you, I could speak for NECO, but I do know my other colleagues at the other 2 schools. We're doing pretty darn well. We're thriving in many cases. That doesn't mean it's easy. That doesn't mean we're just skating along. But it means if you look at the colleges financially, if you look at them in terms of faculty and staffing and the output, I'm very proud of where we are with that. And I think that's something that is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's really good to hear. And again, being an alum myself, it's nice to hear that NECO is thriving. And I whenever I can, I get a chance, I try to nudge or direct my students this way. And in NECO, if it was not on their list before as a potential school, it always ends up being on their list. If not, they end up coming here. And I've had the wonderful full circle moment of a student who came into my office to observe as an undergrad student who then decided to come to NECO and now actually works at my office as an associate doctor. So it's been a very, pleasant and fulfilling experience.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that. And thank you. We appreciate that. Those positive comments. It's what makes it so that we have students here. Yeah. When you say nice things about the college and someone who's influential like yourself, it makes a huge difference. And I'll do anything I can to make sure our colleagues in North America continue to think that way. And, I want to say this too. We're always open. Like if someone hears something or has questions about what might be going on at our institution, it's so rare that I get those questions. I love when I do, because I know if one person's asking me that question, there's probably a lot of people thinking that. So, before we end, or maybe somehow, if you don't mind, make sure that my email address is available to you. And it's a simple one, purcellh@neco.edu, but we can make it available. I'd love to hear from alums, love to hear from anybody. What's your observations? What are you concerned about? Are you hearing things about our specific institution that worry you? We can't have our eyes everywhere. We try, but we welcome that. We love the feedback. It most often is constructive, and it can help us be better. So I think we have an obligation to listen a lot and to observe. When I first came here, I met with every individual who worked at this institution, and they got a half an hour of my time to tell me about their job, about their ambition for the college, and about, if you were sitting in my seat, what would you focus your attention on? And when you start to hear consistencies, then shame on us if we're not paying attention to those things. So I would offer the same opportunity for alums, for anybody who's concerned. And I read a lot, sometimes it's tough. They can be a little hard on the academic world, but that's okay. I think getting and understanding what is challenging and frustrating for people out there only is going to help us to be better at what we do. So I encourage your listeners to share their thoughts. If you're an alum of Montreal, if you're an alum of Waterloo, wherever you're an alum of, and maybe you hear something that you love, tell them you love it. You hear something you don't like, give them your feedback. It's really important. And so few people do it, Harbir, to be honest, that when you do it, people listen. I used to think nobody would really listen, but now that I'm sitting in the seat, I can tell you, I might get 10 a month, 5 a month, and so I'm reading them. I promise you I'm reading them. And sometimes, it makes for a not so great lunch, but I read them, and it's important to get that feedback. So I encourage people, we can't see it through your eyes all the time. Give us your feedback. Give your alma mater feedback about what you're seeing, what you're hearing. It's only going to help them to be better.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, I wanted to give you the mic to share any final thoughts. I know that was a very important one, to make sure you reach out to your alma mater and let them know thoughts and feedback and that type of thing. And I also was going to ask contact information. So purcellh@neco.edu.
That's right.
Are there any other contact points that you think would be helpful for somebody who's reaching out to the school, whether it be a student or any?
I'm happy to funnel those to whomever might be the right person to get that information. But keeping it simple, just send stuff to me. I have no problem with it, and I'll make sure it gets in the hands of the right person. As far as, final words, I guess, knowing the Canadian audience, I just want to say this to our amazing colleagues and potential students in Canada. NECO will always be a place where we will do everything possible to make sure that you feel comfortable and at home here. That I can assure you. And that's been the culture of our institution for as long as I can remember, and that's a long time. And I promise you, as long as I have anything to say about that, will continue to be the case. And if you have any specific questions, We don't have all the answers. I'll admit that, but we will do everything we can to get you those answers. But do know, NECO is a place where you will always feel at home, and we will do everything possible to make sure everyone feels like they belong and they're welcome at NECO. So I look forward to seeing you in Boston.
I love that. That's the perfect way to end the conversation. That was a great message. Thank you, Dr. Purcell, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me here in this wonderful setup. I want to say a big thank you to NECO, Dr. Gary Tu, and Michael, who's helped with this beautiful setup here with the microphones, the cameras, the lighting, everything. Thank you for having me here at NECO. And thank you to everybody who's tuning in to the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I'll see you guys in the next episode.